In 2019, the restaurant industry is entering waters it's never seen, with almost full employment in key markets like Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago, all experiencing a mass shortage of kitchen staff. Employment technology could become one of the key things that helps the restaurant industry deal with growth in 2020. Automation, the gig economy, and a shifting of the American workforce demographics all play into the future of where restaurant technology will need to be. Today, we explore HR technology and understand why this area of tech could be one of the most important. On this episode of the Barron Report, we get a chance to talk with Keith Ryu, CEO of Fountain, an HR technology company. Listen in. All right, so welcome to another episode of the Barron Report. And Keith, thanks for stopping in today. Great to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Okay, so let's go right into Fountain and a little bit about what you guys are building there, Keith. Love to hear more about, especially HR technology, because it's one of the biggest challenges in the restaurant industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So the company name is Fountain. We're San Francisco based, and we started the business about 5 years ago. And we describe ourselves as a talent acquisition platform built specifically for the gig and hourly workforce. And the general thesis around the company was that recruiting for this large demographic of the shift-based hourly workforce was a fundamentally different problem than recruiting for your white-collar corporate roles.
Right.
Happy to kind of dive into some of those differences that we're seeing in the market.
Yeah, obviously the gig economy is one of the biggest factors in restaurant and hospitality. So you guys are right in the wheelhouse of that. Let's go just into a few trends that you're identifying. Obviously, as a platform builder, you've got to have those kind of that building blocks of where the challenges are, where are the pain points that you guys are trying to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started the company late 2014, we saw a very big shift in the way that people were working. In the online world, there were all these new tools like Upwork and Zoom and Slack that was making it really easy for consultants and freelancers to plug in and plug out of different projects and really start to have a relationship between the employer and the worker. And we saw that trend continuing to increase as well. And when we looked at the offline world, we saw the same trend happening as well. This was around the time that Uber and Lyft and all these food delivery companies were becoming mainstream. It's pretty clear even at the time that the same Uber driver is going to drive for Lyft and also bartend at night. And in fact, the average restaurant worker has 2.2 jobs at any given time. But the gap that we saw there was that there weren't enough platforms and tools that really would make it efficient for both sides to kind of match make and screen, train, and kind of monitor levels at a massive scale. And so that's kind of where we came in and built solutions to really help the employers or the company side screen and onboard a large hourly workforce at a very kind of efficient pace.
Yeah. Has there been any kind of integrations with your company and some of the other large platforms that are, essentially doing gig type work? I would see that in some point, maybe API connectivity to help make these gig workers have that ability to kind of almost cross-platform. Anything like that happening in the space?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a ton of new tools, new solutions that are being leveraged to screen the workforce. And if I just kind of describe the average process, it ranges between each company. They'll do background checks, motor vehicle reports, verify IDs, driver's license, sign documents, and there's a lot of reminders that happen in between as well. And if we take a step back to really understand the different challenges here, first of all, it's a very massive demographic. 60% of the US workforce and 85% globally fit within this large umbrella of shift-based or hourly work. So it's a very massive demographic, but one where 90% of the candidates that we see coming in come in without a LinkedIn or a resume. So there's not much information online, which is super inefficient for both sides. It means that the companies have to call everyone from scratch. It means workforce, even if they did a great job at a previous role, the history will follow along with them, which limits their upward mobility. On top of that, even after the companies vet and invite someone on for an interview, 50% no-show rates. So half the time, candidates are just not showing up without any sort of warning. 80% of the candidates are applying on their mobile phone, but you'd be surprised at how janky some of these systems still are. And then on top of that, even after you vet and onboard kind of the workforce, there's 150% annual turnover. So it's a never-ending set of challenges. So we describe this labor environment within the gig, the retail and restaurant side as high volume, high velocity, high turnover, and high unpredictability.
Yeah, so that is one factor that we have seen continuing to develop is obviously and restaurant turnover has been there for quite some time. Obviously now we're dealing with kind of some new demographics, both with millennial and even Gen Z moving into the workspace. Is there anything that you guys are noticing in terms of turnover that is maybe lessening if the technology is in the right spot? Because I feel like sometimes workers kind of migrate to companies that they feel like really get it. Are you seeing anything like that in terms of those trends in the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. There definitely has been a movement towards being more company and employer centric to more employee and candidate centric. And
Right.
I believe that why companies like Glassdoor have become so prominent because employees nowadays want to understand what's going on within each work environment, and there's kind of a definite shift in that in that voice. What we are also seeing is there's a change in the way this new workforce is engaging with their potential employer as well. I think in the past, it was widely acknowledged that you want to be very professional throughout the process. You want to write your own cover letters and have a really neat resume in hand, and you only want to be sending proper emails back and forth. What we're now seeing is becoming a lot more quick and somewhat casual, and there's a shift towards more SMS-based communication as well. And I think in the past that was kind of looked upon as being a little bit unprofessional. It's a little personal, but we're seeing more and more candidates engage directly with recruiters just through quick text messages as well.
Yeah, kind of like business casual for HR, definitely happening. I see it even here in our own business where, onboarding and that process is almost boiled down to Slack and very, fast text or instant message. Do you see any companies that are, for instance, recently there was, this big to-do about I can't remember, it was a luggage company that had a big to-do with their CEO, and it was mostly a Slack communication where things kind of get out of context to where things might be said in terms of building employee culture internally. Do you see challenges of that coming into the workplace in the future?
Yeah, for sure. So we're definitely seeing a overall shift in movement in different channels of communicating, whether it's between the job seekers and the employer, or whether it's between the employees, post-hire. If you're asking about the particular incident with the company Away, look, I don't have as much information about that company specifically, but it's pretty clear that with a shift in the demographic and a huge focus towards inclusion, even if it is kind of the same thought and message towards wanting to keep the bar up and moving the organization to hit some of these ambitious plans, companies do have to adapt in the tone and be much more deliberate in the delivery. And so I think those are some of the areas that we're seeing.
Now, let me ask you, so you guys, of course, are in the onboarding process with your technology. Have you done any kind of integrations with payroll companies like Gusto or ADP where, because that all starts to interlink together and make it a lot easier on an operator? What kind of, movement have you seen there?
The way to think about this is if you think about the entire journey that the candidate has to go through, we consider this in three large buckets. There's the sourcing area, there's screening, and then there's this post-hire workforce management, which includes shift scheduling, time and attendance, payroll, HRIS, and so on. We are primarily within the screening side. So the minute the applicant applies until they get hired, approved, and onboarded. throughout that journey, there are different things like sending SMS reminders, video recordings, scheduling times for interviews, running background checks, signing electronic documents. Those we have multiple integrations with vendors like Checker, like HelloSign, like Twilio, Google Calendars. And so those are all the different platforms that we integrate with and provide in a centralized dashboard. And you're able to set rules, such as if a candidate comes in and meets criteria A, B, and C, move them to stage 2. If they don't, move them to stage 3. And
Gotcha.
in stage 2, if it requires them to complete a background check and they don't do that in 3 days or 5 days, send them an automated text reminder, score the candidate, in a slightly different way, move them to a different bucket. So we basically, we plug in all those different systems, and then you're able to create a single kind of rule that allows all those systems to speak to one another.
Yeah. So there are some trends now where in the past we've seen technology that's been kind of the analytic overload of data for the operator or for the business itself. Now we're seeing some trends in technology development that is moving more to analytics from the flip side for the actual member or user, in this case, the employee, of analytics of their own environment or their own journey. Is that something that's happening at Fountain as well?
You mean within our company internally, or you mean within the product?
Well, within the product, like if I'm a user of Fountain, do I have any options to see analytics of my own? Like, hey, my response time has been XYZ, and different kind of things on my own performance within the platform itself as an employee.
For sure, great question. Today, we've been focused primarily on the company side and providing insights there. But there's a lot of unstructured data that we're currently sitting on that we hope to package and be able to surface to the end job seekers and the actual workforce as well. That's more of a next year product initiative.
Very cool. All right. Well, that's great. All right. So let's talk more into kind of next level trends around automation, AI. There's a lot of discussion in the restaurant and hospitality space, obviously with labor being such a challenge right now, especially in the major metropolitan areas. What are you seeing in terms of trends around AI or even automation, just as simple as a kiosk moving into some of these restaurant operations and helping fade some of that heat in demand for workers? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Largely, we view it in two different kind of buckets. There's a lot of back office software solutions where there's a lot of machine learning, software, AI applications being built to help automate and forecast, whether it's inventory, whether it's labor forecasting and recruiting and scheduling. And then there's kind of the front office portion that's much more facing. And this is where you might see those self-order kiosks. Nowadays there's robots that are making coffee and robots that are actually creating a pizza made to order. And so we're seeing a lot more of that technology come into play too. And so, it's been very interesting. Alongside that, there's been a huge trend towards food delivery and pickup. And previously, consumers would have to call into the restaurants and make a manual order. Now, through software, that's getting automated as well. And so we're seeing that market explode. So it's a combination of all these different tools that we initially kind of saw in the sales and marketing world and customer service and success world, all kind of getting into this world of HR and restaurant operation. And that's been an exciting journey that we've been able to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's kind of wrap up our conversation here on trends. And as you look forward in 2020, HR trends, especially around technology, what are some of the key things that you think we'll be looking at next year and within the next few years, both on the employee side and also on the business side?
Yeah, so I think a key trend or something that we ask ourselves a lot. So right now we're sitting at a pretty, I think it's like a 40-year low unemployment rate of 3.5%. What are going to be the macroeconomic changes throughout the next 2 years? And, alongside developments around autonomous vehicles, and you see Amazon piloting these delivery drones. There's a question around what's going to happen to the millions of folks that are making a living driving for
Right.
Uber or Lyft or delivering food. And there's multiple schools of thought, but our perspective there is that, yes, there are going to be new technology that leads to less drivers, but there's going to be a huge influx of new job opportunities that we might not be able to sit here today and imagine. But I
Mhm.
think we are seeing some first glimpses of what that could look like through kind of the scooter craze. So
Yeah.
companies like Bird and Lime are coming to market. And not many people realize that these companies have to bring on a large workforce. You might wonder, why does a scooter company that doesn't have drivers need to bring on a massive workforce? But it's because every night they have to deploy a large amount of people to go out
Right.
there and collect, clean, charge, fix the scooters, and then every morning redeploy them. And so the point there is that we see a world, and this is again prediction, where there's going to be a shift from just pure drivers and pure delivery folks and people that are participating in the gig space today into more fleet operators and maintainers, technicians, cleaners. And so there's just be a lot more roles that pop up. There's going to have to be a shift, whether it's from an educational perspective or training perspective, from the workforce to adapt to those new opportunities.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely tracking trends around the kiosk space, also around on-demand ordering, which of course kind of helps, soften the need for that front of house worker. And now we're even looking at the impact of ghost restaurants, virtual restaurants, which would change really the landscape of labor needs if that were to become anything of critical mass, at least in the near future, in terms of restaurant employment, because obviously employees is one of the, besides labor, labor being one of the most prolific in terms of cost centers for the restaurant industry, and still growing today. And of course, as we've talked about, the issue with just such a shortage of workers right now due to the unemployment rate being so low. So Keith, this has been good. Learning a little bit about Fountain. I think you guys, definitely there's going to be a space here, for, especially as the gig type of worker really starts to become even more prolific in the restaurant scene. I think Fountain might be onto something. So congrats on everything you're doing there.
Thank you so much. Excited.
Yeah. Great having you. Thanks again for stopping in on the episode today.
All right. Thank you.
All right, so all of you listening in to the Barron Report, of course, you can leave a comment on iTunes or over on Spotify. You can also catch this over on YouTube. To learn more about the Barron Report, you can send us an email to producer@Foodable.tv. If you have someone that you think would be a great interview for the show, and they're in the hospitality space or in business in general, that are really innovators in making things move, this is the show for that. So just shoot us an email. And of course, if you want to reach out to me, do so on Twitter @Paul Barron. Hey, it's been good talking to you. We will catch you on the next episode of the Barron Report.